forefathers. The forefathers of the Israelites were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob was also known as Israel. All the tribes were blessed, but Joseph received a blessing above all others. All the tribes were blessed, but Joseph received a blessing above all others. Genesis 49:6. The blessings of your father have prevailed above the blessings of my progenitors, that is, of my forefathers, unto the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph, and on the crown of him that was separated from his brethren. Joseph was divided into two tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh. Ephraim and Manasseh both became dominant in the British Isles. Indications are that Ephraim prevailed over Manasseh in England, whereas in the USA, the characteristics of Manasseh came more to the fore. This recording is being made from the state of Israel, from the area of Judah, probably close to the biblical site of Brit-Am. And we are discussing the tribe of Ephraim. The tribe of Ephraim was one of the most important, if not the most important, tribes in the Bible, biblical story. Ephraim was a son of Joseph. Ephraim was the primary recipient of the blessings to Joseph, and these blessings are some of the most important blessings in the Torah. And historically, Ephraim became part of the lost 10 tribes. The lost 10 tribes separated from Judah. The first king, Yair ben Nevat, the first king of the independent 10 tribes when they separated from Judah, was Jeroboam from the tribe of Ephraim. And Ephraim was a leader. He led the lost 10 tribes, the 10 tribes before they became lost. They were short after separating from Judah. They were conquered by the Assyrians and taken into exile, in their places of exile. They split up and then they came back together again, and they moved from one place to another, and they eventually all converged in Western Europe. But in the process of moving about and interchanging with different different interchanges that took place, they lost consciousness, they lost remembrance of their identity. They became like the Gentiles, which was what was predicted concerning them. And most of those who belonged to Ephraim, out of the 10 tribes, most of those who belonged to Ephraim converged in the British Isles, in the area that later became known as Great Britain. That is where they were to be found. And from that region, they also gave rise to other entities. They gave rise to the USA. They gave rise to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and other areas. And most of those and the other areas also pertain to Ephraim, though within the USA, there was a strong element from Manasseh. And Manasseh also eventually came to dominate the USA, and the USA received its tribal characteristics more from Manasseh than from Ephraim. But nevertheless, the physical input of descendants from Ephraim was also very important in the USA. And we have numerous proofs showing that Ephraim did settle in the British Isles, that Ephraim was important in the British Isles, and these proofs include the names of ethnicities that settled in the British Isles. Numbers 26, it says, these are the sons of Ephraim according to their families, of Shetulah, the family of Shutalites of Becher, the family of the Becherites, of Tahan, the family of the Tahanites. And these are the sons of Shutulak of Iran, the family of the Aaronites. These are the families of the sons of Ephraim, according to those who were numbered of them, 32,500. Also in 1 Chronicles 7, it says, verse 20, and the sons of Ephraim are Shutalach, and Bered his son, and Tahath his son, and Eladah his son, and Tahath his son. Another name for Ephraim was Egel. Egel, literally meaning bull calf. And the British were later nicknamed John Bull. John Bull is a popular name historically. A cartoon figure in political. John Bull is a figure found in political cartoons, similar to Uncle Sam for the USA. John Bull is a figure depicting England, Britain, and especially England. So John Bull. His name is a name given to Ephraim, and Ephraim is referred to as an eagle in the Bible. That is a bull calf. See Jeremiah 31, verse 18, I will surely hold Ephraim bemoaning himself. I surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself. You have chastised me, and I was chastised like an untrained bull. In Hebrew, an eagle, like an untrained bull, an eagle, restore me, and I will return for you are the Lord my God. So this is a cry. Jeremiah is placed in the mount of Ephraim, a plea to the Almighty to listen to him whilst he is in exile. And he refers to himself as an untamed bull calf, an eagle. An eagle in Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, could be pronounced as angle. Angle. And we had the Angles were an important people who moved from the area of southern Denmark and northern Germany, together with the Jutes and the Angles and the Saxons, and they moved to England. And the Angles gave their name to England. That is where the name England comes from the Angles. Angle is another way of pronouncing the Hebrew eagle. And not only that do we find it this way, eagle being pronounced as angle, but we find angle, the word angle, being pronounced as agloi, the same as eagle in Hebrew, meaning bull calf. So this was a name applied to Ephraim in the Bible, and this is also the name that the Angles who settled in England and gave England its name applied to themselves. And later on, the nickname John Bull was also applied to the British. To the British in general, especially to the English. So this is worth noting. Notice that one of the sons of Ephraim, according to the Bible, was Shutalach. The name Shutalach applied to the Scots, or derivation of it. The original Scots are people who created the country of Scotland, and after whom Scotland is named, were an amalgamation of Picts and Gaels and others, and also of Angles from the north of Northumbria, who became part of the Lowland Scots. And they all gave rise to the name Scotland. And they all gave rise to the entity of Scotland. And Scotland was to join with England to create Britain. And the Scots were also known as Scythai, Scutai, Scotai. And the similar names had all locally called the Scythians. The Scythians are known as Scutai, and similar names to the names applied to Scotland, and in Scottish tradition, the Scots derive from the Scythians. The Scythians were a people who once originated in southern Russia, and from there they moved to Western Europe, and they became the Scots. They became the Scottish, and their name is similar to that of Shutalach. Ephraim was one of the sons of Shutalach. Ephraim is also found in Ireland. Erin is similar to the name Ephraim, and in Hebrew, the vowels are fluid. The vowels can change very easily. So Erin and Ephraim may be considered the same name, and Erin was an ancient name for Ireland. Ephraim is also associated with the name Iverni. The Iverni were, which then whose name is a form of Iberni, the Iberni meaning Hebrew, and that was a name given to the Irish and to the early settlers in Britain. Now, we do not think that most of the Irish pertain to Ephraim, but a portion of them do. There are other Israelite tribes in Ireland, including Dan in the north, and also Ashur, the tribe of Ashur, but elements from Ephraim were also present. And the Irish were important in the history of Britain, even though they do not like each other and they had a bad history between them. The Irish were important in the development of the British Empire. A good portion of the British soldiers overseas were of Irish descent. Many Irishmen, numerous Irishmen settled in England. There are probably more descendants of Irishmen in England than there are in Ireland itself. And also in the British colonies in Australia and and elsewhere, the Irish were very important. So here we have a connection of elements from Ephraim being amongst the Irish, having been there from ancient times. Another son of Shutalach, Bered. Bered in Hebrew, the name Bered in Hebrew means lightning. Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra, 1099 to 1167, he was a famous rabbinical commentator, also an accomplished linguist, and he often in his commentary to the Bible mentions the fact that in Hebrew names can change when they keep the same meaning. In other words, one person might be given one name, sometimes it is referred to another name, when the other name has the same meaning as the first. So according to that, Bered could also become Barak. Bered means lightning, and Barak also means lightning. And Barak was a name given to the Brigantes. The Brigantes were a people, according to Ptolemy, settled in Britain, also in the region of Switzerland, and also in Ireland. The Brigantes in Ireland, also known the Brigantes in Ireland, also known as Be'erki. They were descendants of Davidiy Barak. Here we have Barak. And there's also a god in the area of the Brigantes in Britain, known as Barracks. Hebrew Barracks means lightning. Also found amongst the Goths. The Goths were also from northern tribes, or at least a section of them were. The section that settled in Switzerland, the section that settled in Sweden, and also in Sweden. And amongst the Goths, we found the Boradi. the Boradi were a section of the Goths. Also, there was a people in Sweden known as the Bardi, and also had Bordeaux in southwest Gaul, which was associated with England in its early days, and a good portion, up to 20 to 30% of the English population, according to DNA for what it's worth, belong to the same stock as that area of France. You should note that in Abijah, the book of Abijah, it says, it refers to this first exile this first exile who to be found from Canaan. This first exile will be to be found from Canaanim, from the Canaanites until Zarephath. And the commentators say that this expression is referring to the lost 10 tribes who were in Zarephath, meaning, according to them, the region they knew as Zarephath, that is France. See Rashi and see other commentators such as Nachmanides and also Abarbanel. They all say that the lost 10 tribes were in that area. So here we have a connection linking up Gaul, an area of Gaul, with England and with the lost 10 tribes of Israel. Another son of Ephraim, according to Numbers 26:35, another son of Ephraim was known as Tahan. Tahan was the name of a son and the grandson of Bered. The name of Tahan is also sometimes rendered as Tahath, and this name became the name given to the Teutons. The Teutons were a people in southern Denmark and northern Germany who linked up with the Angles and Saxons when they invaded England and settled there. Eladah was the son of Tahath, the son of Bered, the son of Ephraim, and Eladah. The name Eladah is found in the name given to the province of Ulster, which is named after the Ulaid. The Ulaid, or Ulad, later was Latinized as Uladia, and they were, according to the genealogists, of the same kin as the Ephraim. And we saw that the Ephraim are to be linked with Aaron, the son of Ephraim. So that is another element from Ephraim within the region of Ireland. Ulster in Northern Ireland was named Uladah, and that is where the Ulaid settled. So too Becca was the son of Ephraim, see Numbers 26:35. And Becca is recorded in the Barak Tuari. Barak Tuari participated in the Anglo-Saxon invasions of England. See the book of see the history of the Venerable Bede, chapter 9. In Gaul, the Barak Tuari were associated with the Franks who conquered France, and they are identical with the Bulgari, whose name is given in different chronicles, who described by Nennius in 800 CE, the sons of Nugion and Ing, along with the Saxons, the Vandals, and the Tarinka. These are Germanic groups who settled in France and in England. So here we have a link, an association between the descendants of Ephraim with elements who settled in the British